welcome again, guys, and thanks for joining us today. One of the questions that we get a lot in the office, either through email or through the classroom, is social media policy. And what are the policies? Where are they? Where can I locate them? And since, of course, we're not policy makers at the schoolhouse, what we wanted to do is have a conversation with you guys today about social media policy. So with us today in studio is Mr. David Johnston. He is the head of DOD social media. I'm probably messing that all up, but that's okay. David, first of all, thanks for joining us here today.
Absolutely a pleasure to be here. I appreciate being involved in the event and sharing some time with the audience today.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions. So, one of the first things, if you could just tell us a little bit about your background and your position at the DOD.
Sure. So I've been in communications for the past 25 years. I've spent the past 18 years working for the federal government between 5 different federal agencies. I've been with DOD now for coming up on a year. Very excited to be here. I have the unique privilege of getting to lead a talented team that manages the DOD flagship accounts. They're based here at Fort Meade and at the Pentagon. They're an incredibly gifted group of social media professionals, and they do a great job managing the primary DOD social media accounts on all the different channels, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We also provide support to the leadership social media accounts, as well as being a resource for all of the services and all the social media professionals that are working across DOD.
That sounds like a heavy lift.
It is, but it's an absolute honor, and it's such a talented group of people that we have working for DOD that getting a chance to use social media to communicate with our audience around the world. It may be one of the best jobs in all of social media.
Yeah, I'm sure. That's pretty awesome. So if you could, what is the current state of affairs of DOD social media?
From my perspective, I really feel like we're almost in a bit of a golden age of social media within DOD. I think leadership has acknowledged the importance of social media, how effective of a tool it is to communicate with our global audience. I think the fact that they have been willing to dedicate the resources and the time to making sure that DOD is one of the leading contributors on the social media platforms kind of speaks volumes to where we are as a federal organization. And I think that the fact that we're able to have an event like this where everyone recognizes how important social media is and how vital having these conversations to share information and to kind of continue our group learning is just recognition of how important a role social media is playing for DOD right now.
That's awesome. And thanks again for allowing us to host the forum. So David, can you tell us a little bit, how important is policy and having a policy when it comes to managing social media?
I think it's very important, and I think that's probably the easy answer to just say that and leave it there. But to expand on that a little bit, I think having a policy for social media like we do with DOD, it does a couple of things. First, it kind of protects us as communications professionals. It gives us those guardrails so that we know what's in bounds and what we can be speaking about when we're trying to practice our craft and really put information out there that's as useful as possible. It also protects the Department of Defense because it makes sure that the quality of our communications products is up to a certain standard, and the type of information that's getting put out there is really, it's timely, it's being put out with the appropriate level of review, and it's being put out with that appropriate level of quality so that it reflects positively on the Department of Defense.
So can you tell us, how do smaller units then get their hands on those policies? Or how, is there access or ways to get a hold of that?
So I think the first thing I would recommend is just making sure what the policies are for your unit or your service. Start at that level. That information is generally available through the communications team for each individual unit. Also, each service has a great amount of information regarding social media policies that apply service-wide that's available on their specific websites. Then beyond that, I think being aware of how the DOD has our overreaching social media policies created and available on the main website, and making sure that you're familiar with that information. So I think the key is starting at your lowest level and your most local level, and then increasing that knowledge and just being aware of what's available at higher levels.
Okay. We get a lot of questions about TikTok or about certain platforms.
Yes.
You know, TikTok seems to be the big one because everybody knows that people are on TikTok, but it's like, we're not allowed on TikTok. What's going on with that? So what's going on with that?
I get a lot of questions about TikTok as well. I think a lot of communicators look at it and look at the large audience there and feel like it would be a great platform for DOD and for the services to engage on. I think that in the short term, just because of how TikTok is currently being managed and their current situation, I think it's probably not something that we're going to see DOD jump on anytime soon, at least until some major changes are made with that organization. But I will say that I think it speaks to a larger need for us all as communicators, as the DOD as well, to always make sure that we are looking for what that next big platform is. TikTok, maybe that hasn't worked out for us the way some communicators would like, but there will be something next. There will be a next Facebook, there will be a next Twitter. There's going to be something coming down the road that we're not even aware of right now, that we can't kind of get too locked in to say these are our only social media platforms we're ever going to use, because the social media landscape changes quickly. So we always have to be mindful of what other channels are coming around, what other platforms are becoming really popular, but also just knowing how we go about the process of getting platforms approved, working with our internal teams to make sure that we're not going onto a platform that hasn't been officially approved or that might be a security issue.
No, that's good. That's good. We talk about that a lot in identifying platforms and trying to find the best way to actually get your word and your message out.
Absolutely.
Which actually kind of leads me to another question. You mentioned engagement a few minutes ago.
Mm-hmm.
And there are people out there that I see, they'll get into kind of the habit of like deleting posts.
Ooh, yeah.
Or getting rid of posts, or, hey, this person's not agreeing with me, so, let's hide this or let's hide that.
Right.
What are the kind of rules on that?
So there's not really an official policy that says posts can't be deleted. I think we all have run across situations where we have been asked to delete a post, or just as a matter of procedure, we've needed to. Say, for the sake of argument, that we posted some information that was incorrect, or we had a link that was perhaps entered incorrectly. That post went out and now people can't use it. So I think from a best practice standpoint, deleting posts is something that we only want to do as a last resort. If we are in a situation where we do have to delete a post, we want to make sure that we are keeping good records about why it was deleted, what the original post was. A screen capture, usually will suffice for that. If we are being asked to remove a post by a member of the leadership team or by someone else internally, then we want to make sure we're keeping copies of that email chain, the acknowledgement that we have removed the post, just so that if there are questions later on, we're able to go back and provide that, that information and show that we did our due diligence on discussing the situation and how best to resolve it. So it's a reality that at some point we're going to all probably have to delete a post, but it's definitely something we don't ever want to take lightly, and it's something that we want to make sure that we're doing in the proper way.
Okay. Now, does that apply to like comments as well? I mean, a lot of times, a lot of these things happen in the comments, especially if you get those trollers, those spammers, things like that, does it continue there, or?
So when you get into the comments section, it gets a little more tricky. We run up against, issues of freedom of speech, and we never want to be seen that we are censoring anyone or that we're deleting or hiding comments that people have the right to be able to make. I mean, social media is a public forum, and we want people to have that opportunity to comment. If we run across something that we feel is out of bounds and meets one of the standards of comments that are able to be deleted. That would include hate speech, that would include threats of violence, that would include information that's encouraging others to perform illegal activity, or things that are spam. Those are the 4 categories where we can actually take down a comment or hide or delete a comment. And I would recommend, just as a best practice, if you do take that step, following the steps that I mentioned earlier, just documenting and maybe doing a screenshot to keep a record of that is a good practice from overall strategy. But it's definitely, again, it falls in that same category of something that we want to only do as a last resort.
Okay. This is interesting. Now, a lot of times we get officers, communication strategists, whatever, that are managing, suddenly they're managing a platform, or, it's like they haven't had this guidance or this policy, So I guess this kind of goes back to the earlier question. Is it at that point, do they reach out to you guys in your office? They start at the service level? I mean, how can is there a document somewhere? Is there a doctrine? I'm telling you, I get this question far too much, I guess. Is there a doctrine that says, boom, here are the rules and regulations for social? And if that doesn't exist, I mean, is there plans for something like that?
It's a well-timed question, and I receive that same inquiry often, people wanting to know where is this official document? Where does it exist? I will tell you that there is a work group that's in place right now that's involving the services, that's involving senior leadership, and we actually are working on an updated version of that social media policy. Now, that is something that's going to, in the big picture, hopefully give a little more guidance and allow some higher level input to how social media is managed, the overall strategy that we're using. It's a working document right now. I don't have a ETA on when that will actually be available, but it is something that leadership, I think, has recognized that's an important piece to have to give senior level support to the services, all the way down to the people that are actually, writing the social media post and putting it out there. I think they realize that they need this kind of document, and it's going to be a helpful tool to make sure that we're maintaining that high level of social media content that DOD needs to really have out there.
Something I always say in the classroom is social media is almost like a self-inflicted gunshot wound, right? It's like we all rush out there and we go, hey, we got to be on these platforms. Boom,
Yes.
boom. Is that a necessity? Do you think that every unit needs to be on social?
No, I don't think so. I think that, you have to make smart decisions about how you're communicating with your audience. First of all, not every unit, not every base, not every team is going to have an audience on Instagram or YouTube. They're also not going to have content to support these channels. I would much rather see a group only be focused on one social media platform rather than trying to be on all of them. And when you look, they haven't posted to this one for 6 months and they haven't posted to this one for 8 weeks. I think it's a bad look, and I don't think it's really helpful for our audience either if we're trying to manage too many platforms at once. I think you make the decision of this is the platform where our audience seems to be most active. You engage and focus your efforts on that. And if it turns out that in 6 months or a year, it seems like your audience is now more involved on this platform, or you have a type of content that may be more suitable for a different platform, be it, the fact that you've got more photos to share, or you've got, more, links to press releases to share. You make that decision then about, where your strategy needs to be and what platform you should be on. I think it's better to kind of learn to crawl before you start to run when it comes to social media. So I always tell people that social media to use another metaphor, is kind of like, a puppy. It's great in the beginning, everybody's excited about it, but you're taking on a commitment for long term. So don't start that new social media account if you're not able to support it as it grows through its puppy stage and into a full-grown dog.
Yeah, that's good. I like that puppy analogy. So we mentioned a little bit about record keeping. I know with the Freedom of Information Act and things like that, people are, it's an open world. It's
Yes.
a digital world. People are free to, ask for and request. So how important is record keeping? Should we be keeping records of everything, or is it just certain things that we should be, wary of?
I think it's important to keep all the information that you possibly can. And I say that from a standpoint of having to respond to previous Freedom of Information Act request that went beyond just what was posted, wanting to understand the background of how something got posted. So from that perspective, I think it's very important to have that background information and that documentation. But I also think from a completely operational standpoint, it's important to do that record keeping because, none of us are permanent. Our time will pass and we will hand the baton off to someone else who's going to be doing our job or occupying our positions. And I think it's important that the next person have that information so that they can reference to learn why a specific post was made, maybe why a post was taken down. Just having that ability to provide continuity for our social media accounts long term. With DOD, we like to think of these accounts as something that are going to be around for a long time, and it's going to be a useful way to share information. And we don't want the next person that comes in that seat to be ill-equipped to do the job and to answer the questions. So I think having good records, making sure we're following a very dedicated record-keeping schedule for our social media accounts, and making sure that we're keeping track of the things that unfortunately sometimes gets overlooked, like having secure passwords and making sure that records of that are recorded and who has access to certain accounts. Sometimes it's the fundamental things that are easy to overlook, but again, it's part of that record keeping package that we just need to make sure we're dedicating some time to during our day.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about, we talked a little bit about the comments and the engagement there. There are commanders or leaders that are just like, stay away from comments, right? And then there are others that are, hey, let's go ahead and get in there. Some of them, you see some people put a little bit of personality in there. Some people are just like strictly. Is there, what is your guidance on that?
So I think the comments and the feedback is an incredibly helpful tool, and I think using it to engage with the audience directly or indirectly can really have a huge impact. I'll kind of speak to those two as separate pieces. When you're looking at your comments and you think about direct engagement, if someone asks a question and you respond back to them comments, that's the most basic level of engagement through our social media platforms. I think that's incredibly helpful to do. You can find yourself in a very tricky situation, so I would always caution people to respond to comments wisely and carefully. But it's something that it really lets your audience know that you're there and you're engaging with them, and it buys you credibility so that the audience knows it's not just a pre-programmed bot that's actually posting comments, posting information onto our social media pages. The indirect engagement, I will say, is something that people don't really always look at, but I think for me is something very important. So if you see that in the comments section, you're getting a number of questions about a particular topic, you don't always have to respond to them in the comments section. It can simply give you that message that says, hey, a lot of people are asking about this. We need to do a post about this particular piece of information. If I were a local restaurant and I was seeing lots of comments about my hours, it would just tell me that I need to be making a post so that people know where to go find our latest hours. And I think for us at DOD, it's similar. If we see those trends in the comment sections, if we see particular questions that are popping up frequently, it's an indicator for us that we haven't done an effective job of getting that particular message out there, and maybe it's time to re-engage on that topic.
Okay. Well, with that in mind, you know, we've had some incidents across the DOD over the years. I think the most recent was probably the 2 MiG. And sorry for all my Marines out there for bringing this up. Where, you know, we had a little incident where, you know, we were kind of being more direct at someone about, you know, some comments that they had made. You know, what are our rules with that?
You know, I think unfortunately it's something that, you know, with each incident you learn a little bit, and that, you know, incidents like that are helpful learning tools. You know, we learn and we get better when we perhaps have opportunities for improvement like that. I think that what people need to keep in mind is that when you're talking to someone on social media, you need to be, you know, mindful, just as if you were talking to them in person. You need to be respectful. You need to be, you know, speaking as if you were speaking on behalf of the Department of Defense at all times. You know, even though social media is a platform that encourages more slang, more casual responses, when you are operating as a representative for the DOD, you have to carry that level of professionalism, and you have to make sure that even the responses to comments, you know, things like that, that it may seem okay to be a little less than formal. We have a responsibility just to keep in mind who we're speaking for, and not put ourselves in a position where we're speaking in a way that is could be misconstrued. Yeah.
I always tell people that, you know, they need to meet the expectations of the audience.
Yes.
Because a lot of times we forget. It's like, hey, people still kind of think, hey, we are still the Department of Defense. We still have an expectation to meet from our audience and our followers. So.
Absolutely. And the internet doesn't forget either. I mean, we should always be mindful that the moment something goes out there, it's forever. So we don't want that to come back later on and be able to have that moment of like, I regret saying it that way, or if I'd have taken more time, I would have phrased it different. It's okay to take that little extra time, and if we don't feel like we can respond in the way that's going to be positive or is going to contribute or improve the situation, it's probably best not to say anything in those cases.
Okay, that's good. Well, you never want to end on a negative note. So, where do you see us in the next 5 years? What's the future of DOD social policy?
You know, that's a good question. I like to think that we're going to have a future where we're making it easier for the social media professionals at all levels to have really clear guidance on what's in bounds, what's out of bounds, and where to go to find, you know, that next level of information. I think that from my perspective, you know, perhaps headquarters has been a little less hands-on, and they've kind of delegated things down to the individual services. And the services have done a great job kind of taking the lead with a lot of the policy and a lot of the information. But I'd like to see headquarters pull some of that back so that they can provide some better overall consistency to the services and to the, you know, subsequently to the social media professionals across DOD. So I think we're going to see hopefully more clear policy, more concise policy, and things that allow, you know, social media professionals across DOD to do the best job possible.
Oh, that's pretty. I'm looking forward to that. Make my job easier at the schoolhouse. Well, David, I think this was pretty helpful. We'll probably have some questions and comments that come in afterwards. Hopefully you'll come through and check out our Facebook page, our Facebook group, and join some of those discussions. If not, for those that have questions out there and you're curious about, you know, how to get in touch with Mr. Johnston, you can always email my office, socialmedia@dinfos.edu. We can get those questions answered and get them over to Mr. Johnston. All right. So again, brother, I appreciate your time. Thanks for coming to join us and talking
Absolutely,
to us today.
my pleasure.
And, it's been fun, guys.
Likewise.